All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
So this time, we're going to be taking a look at this article that someone sent our way about some changes going on in the VMware world.
Right.
And in particular, it looks like some pretty major shifts happening around vSphere virtualization for Foundation VVS, as most folks know it.
Mm.
And yeah, the article kind of lays out some pretty significant stuff that's happening. And, we're going to break down exactly what's going on with VVF, based on what this is telling us. And I think more importantly, really what it might mean, for you guys listening out there and the decisions you might need to be making about your infrastructure.
Absolutely. And going through this article, you can't really escape the feeling that VVF as we know it is that standalone option. Its days seem to be numbered.
Right.
We haven't seen an official end-of-life announcement or anything like that.
Yeah.
But all the evidence really points to a pretty strategic pivot away from it, and we're going to dig into what that means.
Yeah, it's definitely not just like a gut feeling or a hunch, right? I mean, the article calls out some very specific, very concrete things that are causing concern, particularly how Broadcom, since they've acquired VMware, how they're handling quotes for VVF, and then there's this, pretty substantial price adjustment they've made.
Right.
So let's jump right into that stuff. Let's talk about those red flags. What are the big signals that the article highlights, that suggest that VVF is on the way out?
Yeah, so the first big one that really jumps out is the reports that Broadcom reps are no longer giving out multi-year quotes for VVF. And anyone who's dealt with enterprise IT budgeting knows how important those multi-year agreements are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They give you that predictability, right?
Yeah.
It's that commitment from the vendor that they're going to be supporting this product for the long haul. When those disappear, it really raises a red flag that maybe their focus is shifting somewhere else.
Yeah, and it just makes it so much harder to plan for the future.
It introduces a ton of uncertainty, for sure.
Absolutely, especially for budget planning. If you can't lock in pricing for, 2-3 years down the line, how are you supposed to, know what you're going to be spending? So yeah, that's a huge one. What about the other indicator?
So the second one, and this is the one that I think really hits home, is the new pricing structure for VVF.
Okay.
The article says it's now priced at $190 per core per year.
Per core. Whoa. Okay.
This isn't just like a little bump,
Right.
This is a major price hike. And when you see something like that, it usually means they're not just trying to squeeze a bit more revenue out of existing customers.
Yeah.
It feels like a pretty deliberate move to make VVF a lot less appealing.
Less appealing compared to what, though?
Well, that's where VMware Cloud Foundation VCF comes in.
Okay, so VCF keeps coming up.
Right.
What exactly is it, and why are they pushing it so hard?
So VCF is basically Broadcom's preferred path forward. It's their comprehensive integrated stack of all the VMware technologies. So think of it as this big bundle that includes vSphere, which of course, that's the virtualization piece you're already familiar with.
Right.
But it also has vSAN for software-defined storage, NSX for network virtualization, and a bunch of other management and automation tools. The idea, in theory at least, is to give you this standardized, really tightly integrated infrastructure platform.
Okay.
Which, can make deployment and management a lot easier.
Sure.
VCF automates a lot of the deployment and management of those core VMware components.
Right.
Which can be a big operational advantage.
That makes sense.
But the thing is, it also really tightly couples their life cycles.
Interesting.
So it's presented as this streamlined, all-in-one solution. But the article also brings up some concerns about what that really means in practice.
Yay. What's the downside?
The big one that they keep coming back to is vendor lock-in.
Yeah, that's a scary phrase.
It is. When you go all in on VCF, your whole infrastructure becomes so tightly integrated with this specific VMware stack.
Yeah.
It's not just about choosing a few components here and there anymore.
Right.
You're basically committing to their entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
And the risk there isn't just about being stuck with them. It's about losing control over your future technology decisions.
I see.
So by standardizing on VCF, you might be cutting yourself off from other potentially better or cheaper solutions down the line, even for stuff that's just adjacent to your core infrastructure.
Right, so you're kind of stuck in their world.
Pretty much.
And the article says that the consequences of that lock-in can be pretty serious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Once you're heavily invested in VCF, it becomes a lot harder to negotiate renewals. You don't have as much bargaining power anymore because your whole infrastructure is built around it.
Makes sense.
And that can mean higher renewal costs, fewer discounts, the whole 9 yards.
Oof, not good.
Not good at all. And then on top of that, if you ever do decide to move away from VCF and go to a different platform, it's going to be a much more complicated and expensive process.
Yeah, you're basically ripping and replacing everything.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The more you rely on those integrated features, the harder it is to get out.
So it sounds like what the article is saying is that Broadcom is making these standalone options, like VVF, less appealing on purpose.
Yeah.
Through these price hikes and the uncertainty around long-term support.
Right.
And they're doing that to kind of force people into this VCF model, which gives them more control.
That's the strategy that they seem to be following. By jacking up the cost of VVF and making those quotes less reliable, they're making VCF the path of least resistance for a lot of organizations.
Especially when it's time to renew.
Exactly.
Man.
Even if VCF wasn't their first choice or even the best solution for them.
So let's go back to VVF for a second. Why did companies choose it in the first place?
Okay.
The article talks about its light footprint. What was the big selling point that they're now taking away?
So people were drawn to VVF.
Yeah.
Because they wanted that core VMware hypervisor technology.
Yeah.
It's robust, it's familiar, but they didn't want the complexity or the cost that came with the full VCF stack.
Makes sense.
So it was a way to use VMware virtualization without going all in on the cloud or getting locked into this big bundled approach. You basically paid for what you needed, the essential virtualization layer and the tools you were comfortable with.
So it was about being targeted and getting just the essentials.
Exactly. People liked VVF because it was simple, it was reliable, and it gave them flexibility. They could meet their specific needs without all the extra stuff they didn't need.
Right.
And it was probably easier on the budget, too.
Presumably, yeah.
But now, with these multi-year deals gone and this massive price increase, that whole value proposition is going out the window. The things that made VVF attractive, the financial and strategic benefits, they're disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different ballgame now.
Right.
And the article actually has this crazy example of how these changes are already affecting customers. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so they talk about these customers who were basically ready to sign big VVF deals. You're talking licenses for like 2,000-3,000 cores.
Wow.
Huge deals. And then at the last minute, they get told, sorry, no more multi-year quotes.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't even a heads up like, hey, this is changing in the future. It was just, boom, immediate.
Talk about disruptive.
Right. It's just like we were talking about before, all that budget uncertainty comes crashing in.
It throws everything into chaos.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It shows how sudden and impactful this shift has been.
Yeah.
And the article says that the vendor basically said, this is how it is now. No room for discussion.
Wow.
It's like a directive coming down from the top.
Okay, so the writing's on the wall.
Seems that way.
And whenever there's a big shakeup like this, someone's always waiting in the wings to take advantage.
Right.
The article mentions Citrix as one of those companies. What are they offering that's, different from VMware in this new world?
So Citrix is really pushing their Zen server platform now, and they've made it part of their Citrix subscription licensing.
Okay.
And the interesting thing here is how they're doing their licensing. It covers up to 10,000 CPUs, not cores.
CPUs. Wow, okay. That's a big difference.
Yeah, huge difference.
So how does that translate into actual savings or advantages for companies that are already using Citrix?
Well, think about it. For companies that are already heavily invested in the Citrix ecosystem, for app and desktop virtualization, which a lot of large enterprises are, this could be a really good deal.
Right.
They basically get a hypervisor platform for free.
Free?
Well included in their existing licensing costs anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that means they can really cut back on their reliance on vSphere and by extension VVF or VCF.
Right.
They get more control over their virtualization without having to pay a ton of money for a new hypervisor license. The article even says that for some really big Citrix shops, Zen Server could actually be considered a free hypervisor.
So for those companies, this might be their way out?
Could be a way to avoid those rising costs and the loss of flexibility that they're seeing with VMware.
So if you're already committed to Citrix, it might be time to take another look at Zen Server.
Yeah, for sure.
But the article also mentions some things to watch out for with Citrix, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not all sunshine and roses. They're honest about the fact that Citrix hasn't always been super consistent with Zen Server.
What do you mean?
Well, there have been times when they haven't invested as much in it or the feature development hasn't been as fast.
I see.
And some people have had concerns about the level of support compared to VMware.
Okay, so it's not perfect.
Right. So even though that CPU-based licensing is really attractive, It's important to think about your core to CPU ratios. If you have really dense server environments, the licensing advantage might not be as big as it seems.
Right.
And also, the way you manage Zen Server is different from vSphere.
Okay.
So if your team's used to the VMware way of doing things, there might be a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, retraining and all that.
Exactly. But like the article says, when your current vendor is raising prices and taking away options, even an alternative with some flaws starts to look pretty good.
Right. Right. It's all relative.
Exactly.
So this all seems like really important stuff for companies that are using VVF right now.
Definitely.
But the article makes a good point that even if you're not a VVF customer, you should still be paying attention to this. What's the takeaway for people who are using other VMware products or different licensing models? Why should they care about what's happening with VVF?
It's about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This isn't just about VVF. What we're seeing is a pattern. This is what happens when a big company like Broadcom comes in and buys another company.
Right.
You want to make money.
Yeah.
And when they start making big changes to pricing, licensing, and product strategy for one product, it's probably not going to stop there. The article basically says that what's happening with VVF is a sign of things to come for the rest of the VMware world.
So even if you're on a different licensing model or using different tools, you could still be hit with price increases, changes to support, or a push towards these big bundle products.
Exactly. The goal seems to be to squeeze as much money as possible out of the entire VMware customer base.
So nobody's safe.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it could happen in a lot of different ways. Changes to other licensing models, different support packages, more emphasis on their expensive integrated solutions. So if you just assume that your current setup and licensing is going to stay the same without doing anything, you're taking a big risk.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for a nasty surprise.
Exactly. VVF is a warning sign. It shows how quickly things can change.
So what's the advice? What concrete steps does the article recommend that people take?
So they have a few key recommendations. The first one is to really dig into your current VMware licensing agreements.
Okay.
You need to know exactly what you're using, the terms of your contracts, how much you're spending.
Right.
That gives you a starting point to figure out how these changes might affect you or to start looking at other options.
Makes sense.
Know what you have, how you use it, and what it costs you.
Good advice.
What else?
The second thing is to talk to your VMware resellers, your VARs, and your VMware account reps.
Okay.
And don't just settle for vague assurances.
Right.
Ask them specific questions about the future of the products you're using. What's the roadmap? Are there any licensing changes coming? Try to get concrete information.
Push them for details.
Exactly.
And what if you're starting to get worried based on what you're hearing?
Then it's time to start looking at other options.
Okay.
The article says you should start testing alternative virtualization platforms in a lab environment.
Right.
Especially if you've already been thinking about it. This gives your tech teams some hands-on experience with those alternatives, and you can see if they'll actually work for your workloads and your environment.
So like in this case, Citrix Zen Server would be one to try out.
Yeah, exactly.
Testing in a safe environment is always a good idea.
Absolutely. It helps you make informed decisions. What about the timing of all of this? When should people be starting these conversations and evaluations?
The article is very clear about this. Don't wait until your contract is up for renewal.
Okay.
Start thinking about it now. If you wait until you get that renewal quote, you've already lost a lot of your leverage.
Right, you're stuck.
You need to have done your research and explored your options before that.
So be proactive. Don't wait until the last minute.
That's the key.
Any other advice?
One more thing. The article says it's a good idea to talk to other IT teams and people in the industry.
Okay.
Share information, compare experiences.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot from each other, and it can help you come up with better strategies for negotiating or even migrating to a new platform.
Collective knowledge is powerful.
It really is.
So to sum it all up, it sounds like the article is saying that even though VMware hasn't officially killed off VVF, it's not looking good.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same standalone, cost-effective option that it used to be. Broadcom has other plans. So you, the listener, have a choice to make.
Yeah.
You can either cross your fingers and hope for the best, or you can take control of the situation and start planning for a different future.
And the article is pretty clear that planning ahead is the best way to avoid problems.
Absolutely.
You can avoid disruptions, you can avoid price hikes, and you can make sure your infrastructure is ready for whatever comes next.
It's all about being proactive and strategic.
Exactly.
And the last thing the article says is something to really think about.
What's that?
If VVF which has been around for a while and seemed pretty stable, if that's in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean for the rest of your VMware infrastructure?
Good question.
If they're willing to make these big changes to one part of their ecosystem, what's stopping them from doing it to other parts?
Right.
So as you're thinking about your VMware strategy, you really need to consider the bigger picture.
You need to think about the potential ripple effects. This could have implications for everything.
It's a wake-up call. It's time to start asking some tough questions and planning for the long term.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, well, thanks for breaking all that down. That was really helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Glad we could dig into it.
And to everyone listening out there, we hope this has given you some things to think about and some ideas for how to move forward.
Absolutely. Stay informed, stay proactive, and good luck out there.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.